Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of In the Know with Kat Bobino. Today, my extra special guest is Dr. Nehemiah Mabry, and he is a structural engineer out there in the East Coast. So, welcome, Nehemiah. How are you?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm great, Kat. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. So,
Awesome.
why don't you tell us about your career and what you're doing?
Okay, yeah, great. So, like you said, I'm a structural engineer. I started school in Alabama studying applied mathematics. And then I went on to get my master's in civil engineering from the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And then I moved up here to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I'm based now, where I pursued a PhD in structural engineering and mechanics. While in grad school, I started a company called STEM Media, and we provide creative and inspirational content for the STEM community. And so I'm working at a bridge design firm full time, and I'm also running a media company on the side, and not to mention a family man as much as I can be.
Oh, wow. So, you're wearing a lot of hats now.
A lot of hats, you know.
How do
Got the
you
dad hat on.
Yeah, right. How do you
Yeah.
divide your time with that? I know that sometimes that's a worry for some students, that life work balance, and now it's not just life work, but then your own business at the same time. So how do you
Yeah.
balance that?
Well, it's definitely a challenge, Kat. I have to be honest with you. It doesn't really come easily. You have to learn how to compartmentalize, and by that, I don't mean compartmentalize who you are, but compartmentalize what you're working on at a given time. It's one thing to do another lot of things, but when you're focusing on, say, work, or you're focusing on studying, you really have to be present and do what you're supposed to be doing at that moment. So I do my best to, when I'm at work, focus on the tasks, the things that I put on my desk as an engineer. I have a gracious wife who provides and allows me to have a little extra time after work, right before and after, to put into my business. So I'm really trying to get the most I can in those 2, 3 hours every day. And then when I'm at home, I certainly can't run a business and play with my daughter or listen to my wife at the same time. So compartmentalizing my focus is really the key in making the most of every minute you put in.
Wow, that is amazing. I appreciate that. I know that it can be tough. I don't have a family, but all the stuff that I do, being on the board of a nonprofit or school and teaching and my own business, it is a lot. And it's
Yeah, it is.
great to be able to compartmentalize it, like you said.
Right, right. Absolutely.
So, why don't you tell us what exactly does a structural engineer do?
Structural engineer. Okay. Well, our job is to make sure things do not fall down. And it's pretty simple in its explanation. However, the work and the things that we have to calculate and analyze is often complex. So, in my particular job, I work as a bridge design engineer. So, we design bridges, we analyze bridges, and we inspect bridges. So, the majority of the things that we produce are for the client, the Department of Transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Each state has their own agency. Here's the North Carolina Department of Transportation. There in California, I'm sure is California. And regardless of what state you're in, there's a state level and then there's a federal level.
Right.
So the majority of the bridges that are out there, they will assign to a number of firms to design and work up designs, submit to them, and then contractors or the builders can then bid on putting those designs or constructing those designs. And so we're working to make sure the beams are correct. We're making sure that the loads that each bridge is going to carry is accurately described. We're making sure that the lengths and the geometry and the, let's say, the environmental effects from what we construct are all considered and taken into account. So after that, we submit our designs. It goes back and forth, a lot of iterations. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
our work involves looking at an existing bridge that may be old, seeing what's wrong with it, seeing what needs to be done to repair it,
Yeah.
seeing how much longer it can last. So that's in a nutshell what I do in my technical career as an engineer.
Well, that's a lot. That sounds like a lot, and it reminds me of out here in California. We have the Bay Bridge between Oakland and
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, and they constructed a new half of the bridge between the first half, which is on the Oakland side, And so we had the Old Bay Bridge kind of almost next door to it. And then you
Yeah,
would see all this time that it took them to take down all those pieces of steel. And I mean, I don't really know what they did with it. I think they
yeah.
sold it, but structurally speaking, it was they said it wasn't a good bridge anymore, so they had to build a new one.
Yeah, yeah, and you all have a lot more requirements or different requirements than we might have here on the East Coast because of the earthquake prone area,
Right.
fault lines, things like that. So there are certain requirements that you may have there in the East Coast that we here on the you on the West Coast that we here don't have necessarily on the East Coast or down in Florida. They got to account for the hurricanes. So each part of the country or the world, for that matter, has its own set of criteria.
So what do you have to account for on the East Coast? What do they have to, if we have earthquakes and Florida has hurricanes, what does the East Coast have?
Oh well, we're actually prone to hurricanes as well
Oh,
here up here on the East Coast. In fact, they're talking about the hurricane. I think it's
Irma.
Irma, yeah, and how
Mhm.
it could take a turn and go right up along the East Coast. So that's something that we have to take into consideration. Not as much as South Florida, but we still have to consider it. Not only that, but tornadoes. Tornadoes is another thing
And
that
you're in South Carolina, right?
North Carolina,
North Carolina.
Raleigh, North
My
Carolina.
bad.
Yeah, so kind of the southeast of the United States.
Mhm.
A lot of times tornadoes can kind of run rapid through this area. And then humidity is actually pretty big down here. And
Ah.
depending on your material, whether you're talking about wood or you're talking about some sort of repair material, humidity can cause high absorption of water, which also compromises at times or changes the properties of certain materials. So there are different considerations. And then, of course, the
Wow.
Northeast, which I'm not in, they have to worry about a lot of snow.
Right.
So everybody has their own little
Right.
considerations.
And that
Yeah,
with snow, right, is the expansion of the water once it
yep,
freezes and then causing, I guess, holes or making something wider, a hole wider on the bridge, right?
yep. I love it. I love the science, the scientific insight, Kat. That is awesome. And then,
Thank
of
you.
course, there's the physics of it being heavy.
Right.
Before it melts,
Right.
it's just on top of yeah. So a lot of that, absolutely.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that's something that people don't really pay attention to, that this bridge you might drive over every day, someone has to maintain it and someone had to design it for it to last for 50 plus years.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And the thing is, when you say 50 plus years, um, not to worry or scare any of your audience, but a lot of designs have a design life, and we're in this country have a need to rebuild our infrastructure
Hmm.
because that 50-year design life has been exceeded by a number of our bridges and structures. And so
Yeah.
um, I would say that the need for people who do things that I do in this industry is increasing. And so, we're going to try to keep America functional and safe as much
Okay.
as possible.
All
Yeah.
right. So then what made you go to school in Alabama and then go up to North Carolina? What was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, Alabama is where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Huntsville, Alabama. I was actually born in South Georgia, but my formidable years as a preteen, as a teen, all took place in Huntsville, Alabama. And there was a school that my family has a lot of history with, Oakwood University.
Oh,
It's a
yes.
HBCU private school down there.
Yeah, I went to
I went.
Stillman College in Tuscaloosa. I know about
Okay,
Oakwood.
you have Oakwood. I
Yeah,
think we played each other in basketball
I think
occasionally as well.
so. I think so.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, so there's a lot of history when it comes to HBCUs. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really, really glad I had that experience. But again, wanted to be an engineer. It became necessary for me to transfer to another school that had a solid engineering program instead of just studying applied math. And so that's when I transferred over to the University of Alabama in Huntsville, which is the same city.
Right.
But then when it got time for me to do my PhD, I decided to do it, decided to go all the way. I said, where do I want to go that actually has an emphasis on the things that I'm interested in?
Mm-hmm.
And so, being interested in repair using composite materials, which is what my research was in, I found North Carolina State to be one of those prominent universities with that type of research program. So that's what brought me up here to North Carolina, and I think it was a good move. I'm happy with the decision I made.
Oh, that's cool. That's really
Yeah.
awesome. And so, can you explain to the audience how your degree in applied math helps you with your degrees in engineering?
That is a great question. As an engineer, I tend to promote my engineering degrees, but having an applied math degree gives me a little bit more depth as it relates to the mathematical connection. And believe it or not, man, there are things that you could do, particularly when you get into research, that are very math intensive,
Right,
right?
especially now with the data science.
100%. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we got more data than we previously knew what to do with. And so having a math background where you're able to um, do, high order matrix math, you're able to do differential equations, and you're able to look at this stuff, see it for what it is, operate it on it mathematically, but then back up out of it and know that it has physical correspondence is very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I know engineers, believe it or not, as much as we use math, they can't stand math. Um, and then you have mathematicians that just know math for math's sake. They
Yeah.
don't really know physical correspondence to the numbers. And so I think they kind of gave me both sides of the coin and kind of rounded out my expertise by having that background.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think sometimes people don't realize how much math goes into engineering. So
Hmm.
having that background in math, I'm sure, was very helpful in your choice to go to engineering and the work that you're currently doing, which is awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why don't you tell us about your business, STEM Media, and what made you want to start that, and what you're actually doing with the business?
Okay, cool. You touched on a passion topic now.
Yes.
I could talk about STEM Media, but STEM Media essentially is a media company that provides creative and inspirational content for the STEM community. And STEM, of course, being science, technology, engineering, and math. And so there are a number of ways that we exercise this service and this offering. One is that we are client services. So we actually partner with schools, we partner with businesses and other organizations and help them produce video content, other types of live events that actually attract and engage students in engineering. Um, we need an increase in our STEM workforce. And furthermore, we need a higher representation of African Americans, of Hispanics, and
Mm-hmm.
those who are traditionally underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of fitting that description, but also having what I call a creative muscle. We partner to produce campaigns and different projects that do just that, attract and engage students in STEM. So that's one thing. In addition to that, there's the brand itself, STEM Media brand.
Right.
We have a social media presence. We have a website, a blog, and also put out things such as podcasts and even video content like what you're doing here within the know
Mm-hmm.
that allows our audience and those who just are who resonate with the style of content that we put out to also be inspired and encouraged in their individual pursuits in STEM. And so there's a client services, there's the digital brand, and then I myself under STEM Media do public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
conduct workshops, and do a lot of consulting just independently as well. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I really love STEM Media. I have a goal to just become the number one source of just all things creative and inspirational as related to STEM.
Okay.
And so I think that definitely overlaps with your mission and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just excited that we have this touch point, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future, Kat.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I like to touch on the fact that a lot of times people consider STEM very analytical and there's no artistic aspect to it. But you being in media and being able to create videos for different people that's all focused on STEM, how do you feel about the integration of the art into STEM, making it STEAM, and how we're using that art side of our brain as well as our analytical side of our brain?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually just wrote a LinkedIn article about this not too long ago. And of course, STEAM has been the modified acronym of incorporated arts. But just in a nutshell, one, I think art provides relevance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can get something to work, but if you don't have the nuance or the intuitive sense of how it integrates in society, how people are going to use this, how is this perceived, which are all artistic in nature, I think you are at risk of doing what a lot of people in STEM can do, and that is create something that nobody wants.
Right.
Create something that nobody cares about,
Right.
right? So having an artistic side, not only in how it fits in society, but how it's presented to society,
Mm-hmm.
um, really change the effectiveness of your projects. So that's one role that art plays. Secondly, I think that when it comes to innovation, it is technical just as much as it is intuitive, right? Sometimes when it comes to identifying that next step or that gap in, say, whatever the industry is, there is just an intuitive sense, artistic sense of knowing what would make an experience more harmonious, right? When you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at how people, I don't know, you could look at a number of things. Look at how people search, right, online. There are tons of search engines out there, but only one search engine stands above because of the user experience, right? The user interface that they have. Google has artistically
Right.
presented, right, allowing people to really interact with it and thus catapult this innovation that they constantly put forth. Not only that, man, but I feel like the arts is what make us human.
Right.
Arts is what allows us to experience things in a deeper way. So those are some of the ways that I see art incorporating into STEM.
Okay. And I know I had told you earlier we're going to have to do a kind of short interview, but I want to leave with this. If
Okay.
there was someone who was interested in structural engineering
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't quite sure how to get into it, what would be your advice to them about going into structural engineering?
The advice about going into structural engineering, I would say, I would say find structures that you really like
Mm.
and study how they're made. All right. Every time you drive through a downtown skyline or look at a bridge, Google it, find out the name of it, study it, find out how it was made, who did it, and just kind of go down that rabbit hole, and that'll give you the inspiration to keep pushing forward.
Okay. Awesome. And I'm going to throw in there, even if you don't like math, you're going to have to do math. So
Yeah,
be open to the mathematics side of
absolutely.
engineering because it's there.
Yeah, it's there.
So,
It's there.
Dr. Mabry, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. I really appreciate it. I know that we're
Okay.
going to have way more discussions after this. And
Absolutely.
I'm so happy to have met you. And we met via online. So I always tell the audience make sure you're out there in social media and be not be afraid to network with people and be able to open up to people and talk to them. So I know you'll see more work with us in the near future.
For
So
sure. Thank you for having me.
oh yeah,
I really,
absolutely. And to my
yeah,
audience, until next time, thank you for joining us and make sure you like and subscribe. Check out In the Know with Cat Bobino for all kinds of interviews with diverse people in STEM.